Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, where each week we talk about ideas for raising kids who become thriving adults. I'm your host, Audrey Monkey. I'm a summer camp director, writer, and speaker, and I've had the privilege of working with thousands of children, teenagers, young adult counselors, and parents over the past 3 decades. My husband, Steve, and I are raising 5 kids who currently range in age from 15 to 25. So my interest in raising kind, optimistic, self-reliant kids who become thriving adults is personal as well as professional. If you're enjoying the Sunshine Parenting Podcast or this episode, I would really appreciate it if you would take a moment to give my podcast a rating or a rating and review on iTunes. This week's featured review comes from Mountain Pepsi, MTN PEPSI. She or he says, I'm relatively new to the podcast world, but found Sunshine Parenting and listened to every episode. Audrey has a pleasant demeanor and features great guests who I often start following as well. This is a must-have podcast if you want to raise confident kids. I know I need all the help I can get. Thank you so much, Mountain Pepsi, for your review. I really appreciate you taking the time to put that in there. In episode 64, I'm talking with Maria Horner about a topic that comes into play very often this time of year in families. If you have a child who's gone away to college, especially if this is the first year they've been away and this is their first time coming home for the holidays, you might want to get yourself prepared. They've probably changed a lot more than you have during their short time away at college. In this episode, Maria and I offer tips for the re-entry of your college student or adult child coming home for the holidays. So today, back on the podcast, so popular from her Jedi Mom Tricks series, I have Maria Horner. Welcome back, Maria.
Hi, Audrey.
So really fun to have you back on the podcast, and you just let me know that this is our first time doing a live podcast interview.
It's very strange to not be talking to you on the phone somewhere.
I know. You were in Ohio, I think, on one of
our...
I
was in Ohio on one, and the other time we talked, I was in my office.
Okay, yeah, so this is actually really fun. We actually are in Lake Tahoe at a conference right now.
Beautifully overlooking a beautiful pool. I don't know how people are in the pool, because it's like 40 degrees outside.
Well, it actually has an entrance inside.
Oh,
you can
really?
Swim out. Yeah, it's somehow inside that you start in the pool, and it's warm enough. But I haven't gone in it, but I just know that. No. So anyway, it is a beautiful setting. We're at an annual conference that we really enjoy, the WAKE conference, the Western Association of Independent Camps, which is probably how we originally met many years ago, right?
I would imagine.
Probably through this organization. So Maria, we are talking today about a really fun topic because it came up, we were chatting on the phone last week, and you shared with me about how you are on is it a Facebook group or a chat group with other college parents?
So one of the things that I think that's been so fun, so my son is a senior in college, and I joined, when he started there, a parent Facebook group for his university. And it has been informative, terrifying, and eye-opening all at the same time. I feel a little better about my own parenting when I see some of the things that other parents are worried about. Like, it never dawned on me that I should be concerned about the food that he was eating, figuring like if he's hungry, he's going to eat. If he's not going to. The micromanaging that some of these parents do make me feel a little bit better about my own parenting. But the big topic of conversation right now on this particular Facebook page is Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. So kids are getting ready to come home for Thanksgiving, and I kind of have chuckled a little bit when I see these moms post these really lengthy descriptions of what their family is going to do when their beloved child comes home from college for the long weekend. Right. And I just sort of roll my eyes and I think, oh, honey,
right.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, your expectations are off. I think part of it, I think just stepping back a little bit, I don't know if you've felt this, but when kids leave for college, for the very first, like maybe whether you have one child who leaves for college or it's your first child leaving for college, it can be really difficult for parents. And I don't know if any of the parents were speaking to that on the group when you first got on it.
Oh, all the time. This is the other thing that kind of almost concerns me a little bit, is the number of parents who talk about how they use words like devastated and how traumatic it has been, not for their kid who's gone, hundreds or thousands of miles away, but for them personally, that their own identity has been lost because their child is doing exactly what their child is supposed to be doing, right? Which is kind of is growing up and going off to do their own thing. And it kind of makes me sad for them. And I also feel very grateful that I have other stuff in my life that I like to do. Like, I love my son and I miss him when he's not with us. And I have other stuff to fill my time.
Right, yes. I think there's not enough talk about that ambivalence that we have as parents, because on the one hand, you are really proud of your child when they go and do something really cool, like whether it's a job somewhere far away or some abroad thing or college. And you're proud of them and you're like, wow, that's so cool that they're thriving there. And it's sad because you're like, oh, our family, the way it was, is no longer. It's like a changed.
You have to adapt to a new normal.
A new normal. And so I just found it interesting. Of course, my circumstances, because of too many children going to college, I never joined any college parent groups, although I like reading that Grown and Flown blog where a lot of people write about that kind of things. But I do think I still had that same experience of really what your expectations are of your kids once they've gone from your home and they no longer live full-time at home, whatever that may be, whether it's going to college, or maybe it would be the same if your kid went to the military and came home, or even studied abroad in high school for a year and lived somewhere else. Anytime they go to a new setting and are developing new habits, new life without your family structure, they're going to come home different.
Right, and because you are in the same familiar environment and structure, how you've changed in that same period of time has not kept pace with how your child has changed.
Right.
And so maybe 2 months have passed, but for your kid who is in that really new, unique, different, challenging environment, their growth is way more than 2 months.
Yes. They've changed so much.
So much.
Yes.
So
I think on a small scale, it happens when kids go to camp.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the reasons that I think camp sort of helps parents ease them into this thing that's going to happen with their kids, which is you have this realization that, oh my gosh, my kid is actually going to be okay without me. Yeah. And, oh my gosh, my kid is really okay without me. And I'm kind of missing my kid more than they're missing me.
And my kid is thriving without me.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you say that, because what just kind of flashed for me is I remember the first summer I went to work at camp. I left school, left my friends at school, left my friends at home, went to camp. And that 2.5 months was transformational for me at 19. I came back and my friends at school and at home had normal summer jobs. Right. And the growth and change in them over that time was nowhere near what I experienced. And so I often reflect back on that when I'm thinking about that kind of change that our kids are having. Like, I experienced that myself.
Yeah, me too.
So of course it happens for them.
Right. So I think one of the things, and you shared this before, I think one of the reasons that we're sharing this topic today is because we have both Thanksgiving holiday coming up, or if you're listening to this later, there'll be holidays over Christmas, Hanukkah, there'll be summer vacation. There's all these times where your adult child, because they really are an adult by the time they leave for college, comes back into your home. And it can be really stressful for, I think, both them and for you. And so we are trying to share our wisdom of being a few years ahead. So you talk about, tell your advice that you like to give people about parenting.
So I really think one of the most important things you can do as a parent is to find parents who have kids who are 3 to 4 years older than yours. Who you, for whatever reason, feel like share the same values as your family, the same goals for your kids. The best information, advice, direction, assistance that I've gotten throughout my parenting career have been from parents who have kids a few years older than mine. And it's invaluable. And that's still the truth. I mean, that's still the case, that I go to these, my son's 22, but I go to these parents whose kids are 25, 26, 27, and ask them questions and get all kinds of great advice. So the best piece of advice I ever got, as you know, I'm fortunate to work with the high school kids at our church, and there's a family there. They have 3 children. Their youngest is the same age as Nick, and then 2 older daughters. And when their oldest daughter was a freshman at UCLA and came home for Thanksgiving, it was a disaster. And good friends with those parents, and the dad said to me, I think weeks after she had gone back to school, and just talked about how horrible it was, because they had this picture in their mind. They're super close family, even though she was only in school, less than 45 minutes away. She never came home. It was a big deal. They, in their minds, not just he and his wife, but the 2 younger siblings, of what it was going to be like to all be under one roof again. And guess what?
It wasn't the same anymore.
It was not. Like, she was exhausted, so she wanted to sleep. When she was awake, she didn't want to bake cookies with her sister and her mom. She didn't want to bake pies or go look for the Christmas tree or any of that kind of stuff that they'd always done. She wanted to go see her friends from high school who were also home for Thanksgiving.
Right.
And it caused so much conflict that by the time she left to go back to school, they were so glad to be rid of her that they felt badly about it. So I took that as, okay,
what do we do differently?
What do we do differently? And I've always really felt like conflict and stress and anxiety comes when your experience is out of line with your expectations.
That's
right?
so good.
Like that's where it happens. And so really thinking about expectations before a child comes home in this particular situation. So what we did when Nick was a freshman with this great piece of advice was, he came home from school, and he goes to school in Ohio, so he's very far away. He came home in the evening, went to bed, whatever, and the next morning he and I, we got up and we went to our favorite little place and had breakfast. And we just had a conversation, and in that conversation we talked about what was different. You've been away at school for 2.5 months now. What have you done there that's different than at home? And we had pretty strict curfew stuff in our house, so the ability to stay out as late as he wanted without telling anybody where he was a big thing.
Right.
And I remember saying to him, well, is that an expectation that you have here? Like, you think that's going to happen here? And he's like, oh, no, Mom. I know that you're going to expect me to be home by a certain time. And so I was glad that I didn't have to drop the hammer on that. But we did go to him and say, okay, here are the things that in this 5 days we're going to do as a family. We have Thanksgiving with the family on this day. We have, you're going to a hockey game with your dad on Friday night, and you're going to go to church with us on Sunday. Before then, we take you to the red eye. The rest of the time is yours. You need to let us know what you want to do and if you're going to be home for dinner or not. But these things are mandatory. They're non-negotiable.
Right.
And we were able to have a conversation. And I think he expected to come home, and he was surprised by the conversation, I think. So he expected... Did
he think you were going to tell him you had to be with you all the time?
Yeah, I think he might
He's like,
have.
oh, they're missing me so much.
Yeah,
they're going to want me there all the time.
So, his ability to hang out with his friends and to go and do stuff, I think it appreciated. And we've done something similar almost, again, every single time.
Great. Every time that he's come home. And now it's been many times of coming and going.
Yeah, many times. And we've had really stress-free re-entries for him. Now, our situation is different. We only have one child. So there are no younger siblings who also, that dynamic, that balance has changed. No brother who all of a sudden has to share his room again or that sort of thing. So that's a little different. The one thing that I had to change, because I think we have to make adjustments as parents as well, is when he was still living at home, it was really important to me that his room was picked up. I couldn't understand those parents who could keep the door closed and be okay with it. After he went away to college, I had to be okay with keeping his door closed, because this kid, I kid you not, would bring home a small duffel bag, would open it up, and I don't know, that the bag that Hermione Granger has,
where unlimited stuff.
Oh my gosh, I would look into his room and be like, where did all of this come from? You just brought that small red duffel bag home. He's like, I don't know, Mom, I unzipped the bag and it just went everywhere. So I just had to learn to close the door, which when he was still at home would have never.
Right, you had these expectations, but you kind of changed, you adjusted, because you're like, oh gosh, he's home for 5 days.
Right.
I can just close the door, I can deal with it.
Yes, exactly.
Right, so that's great. So you thought about adjustments that you could make too. Well, I think that that's really a great advice. I was not consistently being really clear with all my kids, but I do remember making a list, and this is what I will continue doing, is just, here's the events. I just wrote it on a piece of paper on the whiteboard or whatever, like, hey, we're taking a family photo Wednesday at this time, and we're all doing dinner. This is what time we're doing that. And hey, everyone's making one dish. You're doing the green beans. You're doing the whatever. Like, I would assign people stuff. But like you said, other than that, if it wasn't a dinner like that I said, we're all having dinner together, it was open for them to go do other things, go to a movie with friends, do whatever they want, catch up with people. And I think that is really a good expectation. I think the other thing that we need to hit on, which you touched on a little bit early on when you were talking about your own experience, is I think for some parents, they have been so wrapped up in being a parent that it has taken over their life. And so part of, we're learning a lot about overparenting. That's one of the topics that's going on at this conference. And one aspect of that is just really what it says. It's just almost like too much of everything. It's like over everything. Like your focus from your moment you wake up until you go to bed is so much on your child and what they're doing and their life, that when they're no longer there, it creates this, oh my gosh, what do I do with myself?
There's a huge void in your life.
Yes.
And you don't know how to fill it.
Yeah.
So you try to overstuff it when the child comes home, and it puts so much pressure on them.
Yes.
So much pressure, and it's so unfair. And I think the big thing for parents to know, especially if you have a college freshman who's coming home for the very first time, is that they are going to be exhausted.
Yeah.
And you just have to accept that.
Right.
Like that they're going to want to sleep in their own bed and for a lot of hours.
Right. And reconnect with their friends and whatever. I think it's almost the equivalent of, how kids at the end of the day, after a day of school, they are not wanting to sit and chat with you about the whole day because they're exhausted socially and emotionally from just holding it together. Well, think about that to the nth degree. Your kid's been, if they're a freshman, at a new place, holding it together, basically trying to keep themselves, regulated and figure out school and figure out friends and figure out all this stuff. And so they are drained, not just physically, but just also emotionally and everything. And so when you think about it, when they come home, it's nice for it to be a place where they can just plop, and they don't have to feel that they have to be all cheerful or
they're not on. They don't have to be on. Absolutely.
Yes, that's a huge gift you can give your child, is not to expect that they're just going to walk in the door and be like, let's just hang out and catch up, and I missed you so much, and can we just talk? Because that's not realistic.
Well, absolutely, and it certainly wasn't for us.
Right.
Having a boy who, sitting down and discussing his feelings on cue was never his big thing. But I do think that we all know where are those times and places where our kids do want to talk. Because I don't think it's wrong as a parent, if your child's been gone, to want to reconnect with them on a deeper level than you can via FaceTime. So just recognizing when and where those times might occur. And again, for Nick and I, this place that we go and have breakfast, that's just kind of always been
that's your
our
spot.
Thing. It's it's what we do. And for Nick and his dad, it's going to sporting events and driving to hockey games and having that time in the car. And whereas if he came home and we tried to sit around the dinner table and say, tell me everything about the last 6 weeks at school, we'd get a grunt or two and then a stare, a significant eye roll, and it would be over. So just recognizing that, I think, is really important.
I think too, when you were talking about that, it was reminding me, I was interviewing a teenage boy this summer about just like connecting with his parents and what his parents do that he really likes. And one of the things he said is that he and his dad have this tradition. They go out fishing. It's like their thing they do together. And when you were saying that, it was reminding me that almost like these traditions that you can set up when your kids are younger. So like if you're listening to the podcast and you don't have a college kid, but just knowing that like maybe the breakfast spot that you and Nick go to, if that's established early, maybe during junior high, once a month, mom and, Nick go to breakfast.
Absolutely.
And so it's like sort of this tradition that your relationship and your connection time is sort of coupled with that event, just like Tom and Nick when they go to sporting events. I really like that idea of if you have those little touch points that you've established as traditions kind of in your family, what a great way to you can use those as the one-off connection things
Right.
during breaks
Right.
as it works, which is really kind of a cool thing. And then I think the other piece of this is, what are you doing, even when your kids are young, to maintain some of yourself and have something outside of your kids?
And to stay connected to your spouse.
Yes.
So,
yes.
As you know, Tom and I just came back from another long trip.
I'm jealous of all the trips that you go on.
So I really feel like part of my job in life is to role model for parents the beauty of the empty nest.
Mm-hmm. You're doing a terrific job of it.
Thank you. So we just came back from almost 3 weeks of being in France, and 2 years ago we did a similar trip but to Italy, and Tom talked about how he was really nervous when Nick went away to school, like, would I still like him? Which is kind of funny since we work together as well. You know,
Right.
it's not like you don't spend any time
But
together.
your life was like family life.
Right,
It was like a
exactly.
different life when your kids are
So
there than
different.
just the two of you.
So different.
Yeah.
And we have found that we really enjoy one another's company.
Isn't that
And
great?
we enjoy traveling together with just the two of us.
Yeah.
We're comfortable when we're quiet together.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a big deal. We don't feel like we have to fill in every
Right.
second with conversation. So I think really making sure that you stay connected to your spouse and that you have some things that you enjoy doing together, so that that don't revolve around your kid.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
for us, especially when Nick was in high school, like, it was all, our social life was all like hockey games, football games. Like,
Right.
that was
Right.
what we did. Those were our friends, were the parents of his teammates.
Uh-huh.
That was our social life.
Yes.
And when that ended, that was almost harder than him going away to school.
Right.
Like, missing Friday night football games
Right.
at his high school, like, that was really hard.
That was a real community for you.
Oh,
See, that's the thing too.
huge.
So it's almost like, to me, I think it's developing you can have multiple communities at the same time.
Absolutely.
So when your kids are little, obviously a lot of your time is spent in their school community, their sports community, and that's fine. But I think to continue nurturing those other relationships with other people that maybe are not part of that. So I think of it for myself, and I've talked about this a lot lately, just with girlfriends, having more regular connection time. And it's really only been in the last couple of years that I've gotten that going. But to just, I mean, like, so maybe for people who aren't married anymore or who don't have their spouse, they can still be nurturing other relationships
Right.
with people outside of their kids that fill them up, and that are people that they can spend more time with when they have more time, when the kids are not there anymore.
Absolutely. And even looking for just like little silly ways to find things that you're interested in learning more about or developing. This is kind of a silly thing for me, but I've always been teased my whole life about the fact that I have nice printing. Like, whenever we're doing a group project,
yes.
I'm always the one who
Yes.
writes on the flip chart
Yes.
and whatever. So this summer I bought a this is so funny, a chalk art lettering book.
Oh my gosh, I love those things you posted at camp.
And so
your inspirational
so
things.
I bought
I
a
love
chalk.
that.
I bought a chalkboard. So
Oh.
when kids would walk in and staff would walk into our dining hall to get their food, there was this chalkboard, this like sandwich chalkboard there, and every day I would write a different quote. And I loved looking for quotes, but I have a gazillion of them because
Yes.
I've always liked that
Yes.
sort of thing. But for me, it was 15 or 20 minutes every day after breakfast, before lunch, where I erased yesterday's quote and wrote a new one and practiced different styles of lettering. And what was so fun for me was I took pictures of them every day, so
Yes.
that by the end of the summer I could see, oh, like, I'm getting better at this. And it's not, it's not like, oh, I'm going to develop this new marketable skill that's going to take me in a different direction. No, it was just a fun way to be creative and do something inspirational.
I loved those. I loved seeing those this summer. I didn't see all of them, but I'll have to look at your whole string. Love that. And you know what? What a great thing. That's a hobby. I'm not kidding.
Right.
That is,
No,
absolutely.
absolutely.
That is a hobby that you're practicing. That is something that you get in flow. You're enjoying it.
Absolutely.
And everyone needs to find those things.
Right. And it's a silly little thing. It didn't take, extensive training or
Right. A class. You didn't have to take a class. You just
And
started doing it.
Yeah, just started doing it.
Yeah.
So it's really fun. So I really encourage people to do that. If you want to learn how to knit, or if you want to play tennis, or if you want to, take a cooking class, whatever it is,
Right.
just find something
Right.
that's interesting. That
Right.
gives you something else to do. Gives
Yeah.
you some enjoyment.
Yes.
outside of your child.
I do think that helps with the transition. It's still hard because it's a change, and anytime a change happens, and you kind of have to grieve the change. Because
Absolutely.
like for me, with multiple kids in my family and kind of lots of, people leaving and more leaving until like it just is like now there's just 3 of us at home. But part of it is just that readjusting thing and your expectation of knowing that it's going to change. And for me, I really did kind of gird myself for it by, like, I went back to school when a couple of my kids left because I was kind of into it again and I wanted to study this stuff, and then I started writing, and anyway, so I think that it's really important to keep that part of yourself. I wanted to mention, just going back to when you have multiple kids and someone comes home.
Yes.
There is a whole nother thing that part of the expectations need to be for the kids coming back into the fold of family. What are your expectations of them? For example, a really common one for me is the whole phone thing. So obviously every kid has their phone in their dorm with them at college.
Right.
So for me, I've always, just with all the research and everything, do not like phones in bedrooms, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't keep my phone in my bedroom. So I model that for my kids. And I don't let my kids have phones in their bedrooms when they're home. So one of the things that was a little bit of a sticky point was, do you tell your 24-year-old who's coming home? She comes home? And generally I haven't been, but then there were some moments where I said, you know what, I'm going to just ask you guys all to just leave your phones downstairs tonight. And I did just say it to them because I was like, it's causing a problem because the brother is bugging me about it or whatever. So I think that maybe thinking through those things ahead of time, what could be the sticking points.
Well, and hindsight is 20/20, right? So like maybe recognizing that could be a sticking point and having that be a part of the conversation
before they get home.
Before they come home and say, like, so this is a rule that we've always had at home,
right,
and I know it's not a rule that you have at school or in your apartment or wherever you are now. How do you think we can deal with that when you come home?
Right.
Do you think it's going to be a problem for your brothers to see that you get to have your phone in your room? And really putting it on them, because let's be honest, I mean, your girls are fabulous and they're going to come to the right answer on their own. You don't have to tell them how hard it will be for the boys if they get to have their phones in the room. Like, they get that. And if you can just kind of guide that conversation before it becomes a sticking point, before like you're in the moment,
before somebody else, and that's the kids who are at home. It's really, that's the problem, because then it kind of creates a problem for after they're even gone.
Right.
Because then it's like, well, you let so and so blah 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 blah. That's not fair or whatever. So I think
we had very strict no phone at the table rules in our house always, and we don't have a younger sibling, but we did have an issue with Grandpa. Because Grandpa likes to have his phone out at the table, even when we're at restaurants, and Grandpa lets his phone ring and then answers it, and Nick will be like, well, why does Grandpa get to talk on his phone? It's like, because I am not your grandfather's mother.
Yes.
If I were his mother,
I would tell him
he would not be able to have his phone out either. And sometimes you still have to play that card, right? Like, because I'm in charge here.
I love that quote, but that is true, because oftentimes the other adults around maybe aren't modeling the thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what else did we want to cover? I think one other thing you mentioned was, so this conversation, and this does not have to be some in-depth thing, but making sure you and your spouse are on the same page.
Right. Well, because I could imagine, we're lucky again, Tom and I, obviously we live together and we work together, so we spend a lot of time together. But if we didn't, I could see how I would think it was reasonable to say, well, here are the 3 things that I expect you to participate in with our family, Nick, while you're home. But maybe Tom has 3 different things. And then maybe if we had a younger sibling, or maybe Grandpa has an expectation, and all of a sudden there's 12 mandatory family appearances, and that can be overwhelming. So I think being on the same page with your spouse and saying, hey, he's coming home next week. What are we thinking about schedule? Do you have some things that you want him to do? Let's try not to overwhelm him with requirements. Let's make sure home is still that soft place to land, right?
Yes.
That place where you can come home and feel like I can truly breathe.
Right.
Because nobody expects unrealistic things of me.
And I would say, if they want to binge watch some series,
oh, absolutely,
this is the time when you let them do that. It's because they are tired and they need to regroup and refresh before they go back in for finals or whatever they're going to be going back for. So I think it's really good.
I think one thing I just really dawned on me about this too is that Thanksgiving is 4 days, 5 days.
Right.
Some of our kids, mine in particular, when he comes home at Christmas, he's home for 6 weeks. And so I think the conversation there really needs to be, it's one thing to binge watch television, play a lot of Fortnite, and sleep late for 4 or 5 days. But for 6 weeks, like, that's not okay.
Right.
So that's, I mean, we're actually in that conversation right now because, Nick's coming home. He's, he's a senior in college. He's got to...
Do they need to get a job
right.
part-time?
Does he have to
Do they need what responsibilities
right.
around the house?
Around the house.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And it's very funny because we were in a workshop recently, just an hour or two ago. And in the midst of it, I texted him and I said, what do you know about coding qualitative data?
Yeah.
And he said, in what context? And I said, well, you remember I did the cell phone survey last summer.
Yeah.
I have all of these quotes.
Right.
And I keep hearing this phrase, coding the information. I need you to code it for me. And he's like, okay, well, I've got some other ideas about what we could do around that. So, so we're formulating his...
It's like a little project, work-related project that he can do so that in between... the relaxing, there can be a little bit of something going on.
But I think when you're talking about your kids coming home for a longer period of time, whether it's at Christmas
or summer,
setting that expectation up is really important.
Yes.
Because otherwise you get frustrated with them on the couch.
Right.
And we don't always use our best parenting skills when we're frustrated.
Right. We're reading Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. And one of her quotes that we keep repeating is, clear is kind.
Oh, absolutely. I love that.
So being clear with our kids and being clear with ourselves that sometimes we're a little wacky with our expectations is pretty important. Well, I think this has been really helpful. I hope it's helpful to people.
Yeah. Definitely.
But just in terms of, it really kind of works almost for not just, I mean, I'm thinking even just at the end of the day of school, sometimes our expectation is, the reunion is so much different than what it actually is. So I think just always remembering that we can be there, the soft place to land. I like that.
I had a friend who used to say that all the time about her kids, and I loved it. We had a thing with, when I would pick Nick up from school when he was in elementary school, even though it was literally 2 miles from door to door, we would not speak in the drive home because he would be hungry and tired and any conversation we had by the time we got home would end in an argument and the whole rest of the day was ruined. Right. So our thing was we would just drive home in silence. He'd get home, he'd have a snack, and then we'd move forward.
So smart.
But,
so smart.
Well, we only learned that after, way too many blow-ups that were unpleasant and just not fun, but slow learners, but we learn nonetheless.
And I think it's almost like that expectation. Like I started also with experience. My expectation was that people were crabby after school because of that tired, worn out thing. And so when you're not expecting your kid to be like all smiley and happy, it's a lot easier to deal with. And then like you said, later, like our dinner was always our golden hour where everybody was like, because everyone's, we had time to relax. We were just chatting and enjoying dinner. And so it was always a time that was really fun. Whereas, so I didn't expect the car ride home from school to be fun.
Right. Well, and that goes back to that whole expectations versus your experience thing. Like, if your expectations can be realistic, your experience is just going to be better. And if you keep having this conflict, think about how you can change your expectations and to make the experience better.
Oh, well, that is just so well said that we're going to end right there.
There you
Maria,
go.
Thank you so much for
Thanks,
being
Audrey.
back on the podcast. We'll do it again soon.
Definitely.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. For notes and links to everything that Maria and I discussed, you can visit sunshine-parenting.com and search for episode 64. While you're on my website, if you don't already subscribe to my weekly emails, I'd love to have you join me. Each week, I send out my most recent podcast episode, post, articles, videos, and other interesting links that I've found to help parents. I'll end this episode with a quote that serves as a good reminder. There are only 2 lasting things we can hope to give our children. One is roots, the other is wings.
This podcast is a proud member of Parents on Demand, a network of high-quality shows for families just like yours. Download our free network app on Apple and Android and listen to your favorite episodes on the go.